So, earlier this week, the host of the game show Wheel of Fortune, none other than Pat Sajack, you may have saw this, but he actually tweeted the following, quote, "I now believe global warming alarmists are unpatriotic racists knowingly misleading for their own ends. Good night." End quote. All right, I know what you all were thinking. Wheel of Fortune is still on the air? Really? Really? It's 2014. Really? It's on the air? Well, apparently it is. Apparently he's still the host. And apparently he thinks that global warming alarmists are unpatriotic racists. So look, progressives, if you are watching Wheel of Fortune, which, let's be honest here, you're probably not. But if you are, actually, let me narrow this down a little bit further here. Grandma, if you're listening to the show right now, I know podcasts are kind of hard for you to understand, but Grandma, if you're listening, Pat Sajack is a climate denier. I know what you're saying, Grandma. I know you're saying, but Pat Sajack seems like such a nice young man. But apparently he's not. Apparently he's a hardcore right-winger who doesn't believe in science. And look, we're not going to spend any more time really on this whole thing because, seriously, it's Pat Sajack. And seriously, who cares, right? I mean, really, who cares about what Pat Sajack thinks? But the reason I bring this up here at the top is because it actually leads us into another story that Chris Mooney over at Mother Jones has on a poll that came out of New Hampshire. And this one actually does matter. So the poll asked people in New Hampshire the following question: do you trust scientists as a source of information on climate issues? Pretty straightforward question, right? Again, do you trust scientists as a source of information on climate issues? So let's get to the results here. So 83% of Democrats answered yes, they do trust scientists. 1% of Democrats say no, whoever that is, and 15% say they're unsure. 63% of independents do, in fact, trust scientists when it comes to climate science. 13% do not, 25% unsure. A little, not that great of numbers, but still a vast majority of independents believe in scientists when they talk about the climate. And here's where it actually gets interesting, all right? So 60% of traditional Republicans actually do trust scientists on climate issues. 60%. There's 9% of traditional Republicans who flat out do not, and then you have 31% who are unsure. Then we get to Tea Party members. I think you probably see where this is going. Only 28% of Tea Party members in this poll trust scientists on climate issues. 28% trust them. 43% of Tea Party members do not trust science. They do not. 43%, the majority, not the more than the other two, and then 29% are unsure, which again I would lump unsure in with people who do not trust that. So, 72% of Tea Party members either just do not trust scientists or they're not sure if they do. My buddy comedian Jamie Kilstein really has this great bit on how if you don't believe in science, you actually shouldn't be allowed to use any science. You shouldn't be allowed to use electricity or elevators. You have to take the stairs is his bit. It's really good stuff. And God, he is so right. And this is really, though, this whole poll is very telling, but it's also unbelievably dangerous when you look at it. Because, look, the fact is that it's not just the right-wing media, but actually the corporate media that for decades has presented climate change as a, quote, debate. Instead of actually as science. It's either or. There's two sides of this tale. No, there's not. There's no two sides of this. And the fact that the media has done this, again, both right-wing and corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, they don't actually talk about climate change. Fox obviously does it as a hoax and stuff like that. But it has produced horrific consequences when it comes to the actual competency and education of the people of this country. It's 2014, and we have a large chunk of our nation that flat out does not believe in science. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. We also have, in my humble opinion, the bigger problem. And that problem is that we have a bunch of people, like 83% of Democrats, who do claim to believe in science. They say, yeah, I believe in science. I believe in climate change. We have that 83%, and a vast majority of that 83% are doing next to nothing to actually fight climate change. Or in some cases, like most Democratic politicians, like President Barack Obama, they're actually doing things like embracing fracking, embracing offshore drilling, KXL. We have a good percentage of Democrats who claim to believe in science who are actually making climate change and the climate crisis worse. And they say they believe in science.